Welcome to Knowledge as We See It, the show where we explore what engagement and knowledge means to us in your workplace. I'm your host, Steve Berg, and today I am joined by Jennifer McClure, the CEO of Unbridled Talent and Chief Excitement Officer of Disrupt HR. She's an expert on the future of work, strategic leadership, innovative people strategies, and today she's going to share her thoughts on the best way to unlock your team's productivity. Jennifer, I'm super excited to hear about Knowledge as You See It on the Knowledge as We See It podcast.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation today.
Now, I'm super psyched that when our producers first came to us and said that they had booked you, I was really, really excited, to get to talk to you. But before we jump in, we always ask our guests a few questions that have nothing to do with the professional side and are a little bit more personal, but nothing too invasive.
Those are my favorites.
So can you tell us a little bit about your background? Where are you from? What did your career journey look like? And how did you get to where you are today?
Sure. I was born in Cleveland, Tennessee in the U.S. and actually grew up in a log cabin on a farm. I'm the fifth generation to grow up in that house on my family's farm in Tennessee and still have the farm today in our family. So that was a great way to grow up and taught me a lot about hard work and work ethic and living with less and being happy with that. So really grateful for my parents for setting me up for success. When I graduated from college back in the day, I was not sure, like a lot of students today still are, of what I wanted to do. And my advisor asked me my junior year what my major was going to be because it was time to pick. And I said, for some reason, never having met anyone who worked in, at the time it was called personnel in the U.S., I said personnel. And they said, we don't have a major in that. And I said, fine, then what can I take some classes? And they said, we have one. It's called industrial relations. I'm like, I'll take that. So we
weren't even at industrial organizational psychology yet.
No, it was, I got a business management major, so just a general business major. And I took one class in industrial relations and I joined the Society for Human Resources, which again was called the American Society of Personnel Administrators at the time. And then I came out into the world and I said, I'm ready to be an HR person. And everyone said, you have no experience as an HR person, which is what everyone says. So finally, I managed to have a good ear when someone in a group that I was in said she was leaving on maternity leave and her company would be hiring her replacement. And she had started an HR department in a small company. She was the shipping and receiving manager, and they asked her to start the HR department. And I said, oh, pick me. And for some reason they did. And so I started as an HR department of one in a small company and also managed 8 people who were loading and unloading trucks and warehousing in the company, which I had never done either.
Because that goes together.
That's right.
That's how it works.
I had the best business card ever, shipping and receiving manager and personnel manager.
Because that's the logical thing that we would group together in an organization.
But I always tell people, they're like, well, why did you choose that? Never having, the only job I'd held was in a country grocery store. So the store manager hired me. And I don't know, maybe I was a millennial before millennials were a thing, but I wanted to run the world and I figured nobody would hire me as the CEO out of the block. So I said, well, I'll go into human resources because they have influence and impact over everyone in the organization. They don't just work with a small team. Everything they do impacts everybody. So that's got to be the best place to be. And here I am 30 plus years later. I think that was absolutely the best decision because I believe that more today than ever, that people that work in the people function are the most important employees in the organization because they do have the opportunity to have the most influence and impact. And I spent about 20 years growing in skills and responsibilities and leadership and executive roles, working where I think, thankfully picked some good organizations to work for where HR was valued and was well ahead of its time. I think certainly a lot more organizations now see that, but worked with CEOs who really felt like it was an integral part of the business strategy, and so really saw that opportunity to have influence and impact. The last company that I worked for, we sold it. That was the plan coming in, which I failed. I failed to ask a lot of questions along the way, but I never said, hey, are we trying to sell this place that's about to go bankrupt that we're being hired to turn around? And after a couple of weeks, I kept hearing, when we sell the company, and I went to the CEO and I'm like, this is usually a bad thing. And he goes, no, this is what we're here to do, to build up the value of the company, to get the company back on the right track so that we can sell it to the right people who will steward it into the future. And that's what we did. So I found myself without a job after that was over, and a little burnt out because it was a turnaround situation. It was a lot of hard work, a lot of great work that we did as a team, but decided to go in a different direction, thinking I would start my own business. Talked to a lot of people who were smarter than me who said, please don't start your own business. You don't know what you're doing. You've never done business development. You don't know what you'd sell. And I'm like, you mean I don't?
This is how you know?
Yeah.
None of those people are millennials. You have no idea what you're doing. Don't start a business.
But I was ready.
So
I was ready. But thankfully, they talked me into. They said, "Why don't you take a baby step? Go somewhere where someone can help you learn the relationship building and the skills that you'll need to develop your business to get a little more clarity around what you're good at in terms of delivering for other organizations." So I took a step into executive search with a wonderful company here in Cincinnati, with an owner who was very willing to teach me and allow me to eventually start my own business with his support. So I worked there for about 4 years, helping companies find leaders and executives for their organization. Got an executive coaching certification during that time, and also made a decision, because so many people had been so helpful to me during my kind of transition phase about thinking about what I wanted to do. I decided to give away 10% of my time to others to help them, senior level executives. I picked a group that I could help in their executive job search. And through that, a lot of those leaders would then go back to organizations they were a part of and say, hey, we should have Jennifer McClure come in and speak to our group about networking or personal branding or relationship building. Or when they got hired, they wanted me to come and talk to their HR recruiting teams about using social media for HR and recruiting or employer branding, et cetera. And so that turned into some speaking opportunities that I had not really thought about. And that's what I found really exciting. I love teaching people. I love helping them to see what their opportunities are to make an influence and impact in the world. And in 2010, decided to step out on my own as a professional speaker. And so that's what I do.
That's awesome. I mean, I have to say, as much as you say you were the first millennial, right? That's how I'm interpreting it.
The first.
The first. There was none before you. It honestly, like, it actually follows so much of that millennial career path of like, I'm going to learn what I need to know, and then I'm going to go do it instead of sitting and saying, well, I could be here for 15 years in this job and it's fine, it's comfortable. You kind of had that spark that I think we're seeing a lot of in the millennial workforce today of like, no, if something is broken, we need to fix it. Right. It needs to be fixed. I was reading something the other day, some report that talked about that millennials have no patience for process inefficiency.
Oh, I'm not a millennial by age, but I believe that to my core, yes.
And it was like, for myself, who listen, I'm right smack in the middle of millennial. I was like, wow. When you hear that generalization about yourself and you're like, oh, that hits right at home. Mm-hmm. It really. So obviously you've had a great career and you continue to have a great career. What's the best career advice that you've received personally?
I think, there's been a lot of them, a lot of times where maybe my mentors or bosses gave me great advice was usually following some mistake or misstep on my part. But I know the one that comes to mind is the CEO in the company that I worked for. That was a turnaround situation. I was coming out, he'd hired me from a Japanese company that was very people focused. And so we actually, the number 2 person in the company was the SVP of HR. He was in all the decision making. We made a lot of decisions that maybe didn't make business sense, but it made people sense. And so when I came to this company for the purpose of turning around the culture and the financials of the organization, I kept telling people we need to do this for the people because it's the right thing to do. And one day he sat me down shortly in my employment and he said, Jennifer, I appreciate your people first approach, but here cash is king, and we can't help the employees if we don't make the right business decisions and help the company become successful. So having a business mindset, which I think I had, but I was very adamant that we need to do this because it's the right thing to do. I learned that you need to bring data into your proposals and your ideas as to why this makes business sense to do the right thing. And if it is the right thing to do, you have to do the research or build the business case to why it makes bottom line business sense. And a lot of people say, oh, that's capitalism and it's not placing people first. I think it's placing people first because, again, the business can't be successful, or the people can't be successful if the business is not successful. We can't provide employment. We can't give people raises. We can't help them grow their careers if we're not meeting our shareholder expectations or returning profit to the people that own the business. So helping me, I think, to change my mindset we just do everything that's right for people first, to I think the strategic leaders, and that's what I talk with a lot of people leaders about, thinking strategically means what are the business needs? How do we meet the business objectives? And how do we make sure that the people are treated appropriately and they already are the biggest part of that opportunity to do that?
And I could not agree more with that statement. I think what you're seeing, especially over the last few years, is it became people first, but in a way that was very unhealthy for the business. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the business started becoming, second. And obviously, the counterpoint to that is, well, we don't live to work, we work to live. And as I agree with that statement, but remember, it's also you are working to live, and you need to have that salary coming in, which means your business needs to be doing well and achieving its revenue targets and achieving its revenue goals. Mm-hmm. And the way that we as companies need to staff for that business goals, not just to provide jobs, but to provide jobs that can provide impact onto the bottom line of the business and bringing the right skill set from our people to hit the bottom line of the business. I think that it's going to work amazingly in the topic of the podcast. But last personal thing about you. Can you tell us one thing that not many people know about you?
Well, I think enough people know about it now because I talk about it. I'm a huge BTS fan. So if you're not familiar with BTS, it's a Korean boy band, I guess. Well, they're young men now. And I discovered them about a year ago, scrolling through Instagram, and I absolutely love their music, love them, and I am looking forward to going to see my favorite Korean rapper, Suga August D, in May of 2023. I secured a ticket in the
Nice.
carnage that was the Ticketmaster sales, and I am excited. And a lot of people say, wait a minute, aren't you a lot of things that shouldn't be a BTS fan? And I'm like, have you ever looked at the BTS army? You don't know us.
It's, you know what? The funniest thing is when it was, the big thing was the Beliebers.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, if you're not a 12-year-old girl, you don't have any business doing it. Do you see all the middle-aged men?
The Swifties, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people that, The world is our opportunity to be fans of. So, don't let somebody put you in a box. And I am not in a box.
No, you are. You're a millennial before your time.
I'm a millennial who's way older than that. I'm an HR person who thinks business first. A lot of things.
Yeah, I was about to say that you're breaking all of the all of the boxes that someone might put you in.
I hope so.
So let's jump into our topic today, because I want to kick things off with talking about the biggest challenge that leaders are facing today. And I think one of the things that leaders are looking at right now is productivity, right? So if you're in a technology company or in a few other companies that have already had big cuts, right? The downside of cuts is not only do you see, a portion of your workforce leave, which means tasks that had been being managed by some people are no longer being managed. You also see a decrease in existing productivity. Right? Because the guy who used to sit next to me, who was my work buddy, who I came in every day, had lunch with every day, is not here anymore. Or, whoever it is that I used to be very close with is no longer here, and I'm just not as motivated as I used to be. How do we kind of, as leaders, step in and get that team back and then further beyond, to increase that team's productivity?
It really is. I mean, it's business first. I will always say that, business first. But leaders, in order to achieve that, really have to connect to their people first. They have to know their people. And I know spans of control are getting out of control in some cases, but, if that's your situation, then maybe you're going to have to work harder as a leader. But hopefully you have a size of team that you can really focus in on. And when maybe you have done some layoffs, or there is some survivor's remorse, or people maybe are bitter because it wasn't handled the right way by people above you. Your job is to really connect with your team, to bring everyone together and to get them to see that the work that they do matters, and to understand how maybe you might need to redistribute the work. It's an opportunity, if you can frame it that way, hopefully to your people, to say, I want to know what your skills are that you're good at, maybe not that aren't included in your job description. What are you passionate about? What do you really enjoy working on? Maybe how can we redesign some of the work that we do in order to make sure that you're more motivated than ever and excited about the work that you do, even in challenging times, because you're having the opportunity to grow, to develop your skills, to do things that you're really passionate about. I think it's really important for leaders to understand how to set a vision for their team. There's the company vision, what we're out to do to make the best widgets in the world that improve everyone's lives. That's some version of most every company's vision. But what's the vision of our team, and what is my vision for you as our team leader to accomplish that so that people can reach for something? Again, the situation that I joined that was the turnaround situation, I cried when I accepted that offer, and not in a happy tears way. I was scared, frustrated, not sure it was the right decision. It was a turnaround. It was a very old company. The company was about to go bankrupt. And I was leaving a company that was world class, where people came to actually benchmark what we were doing. And it was growing rapidly. And it was a Japanese company, and they really said you had lifetime employment. So it was a great company, and I was convinced to take an opportunity that didn't look like the best opportunity, because the CEO grabbed me with his vision. And his vision was not just to turn around the company to sell it, because again, we didn't talk about that in the interview. His vision was to make life better for the people that had worked there, many of them for 30 and 40 years. He felt like the employees were being mistreated, that they weren't a part of the company goals, that they were made to feel separate. The company had been unionized for many years. And he really wanted to hire. He told me that the HR person was he was a big Good to Great fan. He said, you're the last seat on the bus that I'm filling, because I think it's the most important position. And I really want you to help me to get people's lives to be better. So working through very challenging times, trying to increase productivity when people were checked out because they had been treated poorly, to get me to sign up for that, he cast a vision that I couldn't help but want to be a part of. And so we had to then come into the organization, and I had to convince an HR team whose leader had been there for 27 years and who was let go without being told he was being let go on a Friday. And then I walk in on Monday and say, hi, I'm here to help. I'm your new boss. They were not into me. They were not excited about
Oh, no,
the
I
new
would
leader.
imagine not.
And they were very beat down, because they felt like, this was a person that they'd worked for a very long time. And how could they trust anyone that would let him go? So to get them on board, it was really, I want to understand, what you do today. I want to help you to feel like you're valued in the company. I want you to be a part of this team and to help us to really change this place for the better. And that took some time, but it was by spending a lot of time working with people individually on my team, understanding them, and a couple of them let me know, hey, this is not going to be the environment for me. I'm going to be leaving. I'm like, thank you for telling me that. How can we work well together? How can I support you until you find the right opportunity? Because I need you. I need to learn from you. I need you to help me. So how can we make this a win-win for both of us? So to your question about productivity, when things are stressful and tough, it really is getting that connection, casting a vision that people want to be a part of, helping them to see this as a growth opportunity. Not everyone wants to grow or is very, aggressive about career growth, but they do like to learn new things. They do like to have more recognition. They do like to have opportunities to be a part of something special. So how can you find out what matters to them and connect with that?
Yeah, I was actually talking with my wife the other day about a member of her family who he had moved up and up and up in his company. And then at a certain point, he was managing a team of like 12 people. And it just occurred to him one day that he really just did not like managing other people. That is just not part of the skill set. It wasn't something he was interested in doing in his job. Mm-hmm. And he got very lucky in the fact that he had an employer who said, well, just because you don't want to manage people doesn't mean you can't continue to grow with us as a company. and grow in your career. And they kind of mapped for him his own career track that put him on a strategic level in a senior position,
Yeah.
but allowed other people to be responsible for the execution of his vision without him having to directly manage the processes. And I think that's a great example of a company saying this is the strength of a certain team member and a weakness of a certain team member, and how do we foster that versus, well, he doesn't fit exactly into the box that we have built for this role, so if he doesn't fit it, goodbye, which is what I think you get at most companies.
And I think the future of work, people are often asking me, well, what is the future of work? And I always say it's tomorrow. They don't like that answer. But I think the future of work and what we're seeing now, particularly post-pandemic with the labor shortages, and that won't get better necessarily in the future. There's a lot more focus on skills and developing skills and, again, identifying skills of people in your organization. And that example that you just gave is a perfect example of that. I think back to my career in HR as a practitioner, and I have a lot of regrets, but maybe I was dealing with the information that I had at the time. But as you just said, had that senior executive come to me in the past and said, I no longer want to manage people, I'd be like, well, that's your job. And so you're going to have to leave. But I think, now companies are realizing that this person is a good fit for our company. Let's assume this. They're a good fit for our company. They do good work. They have skills that we need. They understand our culture. We need to find out how we can utilize their skills, desires, and their talents rather than just saying you need to be in this box only. And that's really the future of work, is us figuring out how to develop the people that we have or the people that we hire into the jobs of the future. And some of that is going to be allowing them to pick some of their path. And some of that's going to be us saying, hey, can we develop you into this path? But really being much more flexible with how people grow or the jobs that they do and what a career path looks like, instead of being up or out. Being how can we grow to add more value to the company and so that you can grow and develop as a person.
Absolutely. I think as leaders, we have the responsibility to build that environment, right? So if I'm trying to build this environment, it fosters productivity, it fosters motivation. How do I also build into that to promote that culture of continuous learning, the continuous development that's going to enhance my team productivity, but also allow my team members to uncover what are the skills that I have that are strong, that I love, and skills that are weak, maybe I have no interest in developing them. How do I even help them uncover that about themselves so that we can build a plan for them?
I think you have to reward and recognize what you want to happen. It's like anything else. If you want it to happen, then you need to incentivize it. You need to measure it. So first, I think you have to measure your leaders on their performance in developing people. In the past, we've measured leaders, maybe, hopefully, not every organization does, but we've measured retention. So when it comes to internal promotions, they're like, no, you can't have my person, or they discourage that, or maybe they become a roadblock because they don't want to lose the skills on their team, or they don't want to be dinged for, having to hire someone else to fill that position. But we should be rewarding leaders for developing people and growing them in the company. So maybe that's even part of your incentive plan. Same thing for individuals. How are we rewarding them for developing new skills? Are they able to gain more pay if they become more skilled and more valuable, not just for going up in job title or a position on the organization chart? And then also thinking about how are we rewarding people who are those solid individual contributors who are doing a good job and doing what we need. They have no desire to be a manager or a leader, and maybe they are taking, I think everyone, you can't say that people have to be are going to be able to be stagnant in today's world, because the skills are just being replaced. We need to learn new technologies. We need to learn how to deal with people virtually. We need to understand new ways to collaborate. So we are all going to be forced to grow and develop. But how can we put systems in place that actually reward and encourage professional development, not just for the employee, but for the leader as well, for developing their people?
So you just hit on a topic that has come up, I think, on every single episode that I've hosted so far, which is getting leadership buy-in, right? So obviously you have on the one end the KPI, which is almost a negative KPI, right? When you look at employee retention, it almost stimulates somewhat of bad behavior as well, because anyone who leaves the team, right, now you have an executive who's looking at something that maybe they shouldn't be looking at, right? Mm-hmm. If someone leaves, maybe that's a good thing.
Right.
It might in fact have been an employee that the leader didn't really love, wasn't, in his opinion or her opinion, really contributing, but they're going to hold on to them because they don't want their employee retention rates to look down. But the best thing for the team is really for that person to leave. So we don't want to, there's that balance that needs to happen on both sides. How do we get leadership buy into this? Because like you said, there is that defensive moment of, well, if this person leaves their job, then I'm not going to, leaves and goes to another role. For example, when Jennifer was early on in her career and she took over HR and truck drivers, right? Now, if she goes HR only, who's managing my truck drivers? Right? And then she goes managing the truck driver. Right. That's so how
I developed someone on my team to replace me.
Right. So
and then when I left the company, and then when I left the company and moved, he actually replaced me as the personnel manager because he was such a great people leader. But yeah, I think we have to think differently. I know a few years ago, I was asked to do kind of a presentation on diversity and inclusion, which is not what I should be doing today. But at the time, someone asked me to talk about diversity and inclusion. There are people out there that are much better experts than me at that today. But I did some research, obviously, because I wanted to share kind of, what was working in the field of diversity and inclusion. And I looked at companies that were getting rewarded and recognized for the diversity and inclusion efforts. And one of the common things among the people who were winning awards for their performance in, doing the right things and actually doing what they said they were due. In almost all of those companies, the leaders were incentivized. They were incentivized. Part of their bonus structure was involvement in employee resource or sponsorship of employer resource groups, being involved in the community in diverse groups and organizations, being a part of recruiting and bringing people into the organization from diverse backgrounds. And those companies were doing well because it was part of the company culture and part of what we are rewarding people to do because we know it makes us more successful to have a more diverse and inclusive workforce. So I think it's the same for professional development. As I said, too many organizations, and again, we're humans. If I'm a leader and you're my star employee and you come in and you tell me you want to take a promotion and go to work in another department, not only am I losing my star employee who takes a lot of the things off my plate, but now I've got to replace you. I've got to hire somebody else. It's just a big hassle and I don't want to do it. So I'm going to really probably not be very supportive of that idea. What we have to do again is to have a culture that our managers get excited about. Wow, I've developed you and worked with you enough that you are ready to move on into the next phase of your career. And there's going to be somebody else in the organization that has been developed by another leader, or maybe even someone on my team who's going to be able to step into your position and grow into that and do a great job. So it really is a cultural mindset. And part of cultural mindsets often is how do we reward and recognize and incentivize people?
Yeah, I actually had that exact situation. I had a member of my team in my last job in New York before I emigrated and moved down to the States. I had one member of my team who was an absolute rock star. I mean, you talk about taking things off someone's plate. I was in the position of doing a lot of client management and spending a lot of time on the phone with our clients and just keeping them calm and let the teams do their job. And you guys were like kind of that role. And she kind of took a lot of the heavy lifting on the executional side of things. And the funny part is when I actually decided, okay, I am leaving this job, I was sitting with my boss and he turns to me and says, who should take over your role? And I was like, absolutely she should. And he looks at me and goes, I 100% agree. There's only one problem. She resigned 2 days ago because she's leaving to go get her master's degree. And I was like, you shouldn't discourage her from doing that, but also you shouldn't be letting her leave. Like, if this is part of her long-term goals and this is someone who we see is a bright future in the company, how can we contribute to her getting her master's degree to guarantee that when she gets her master's, she's coming back to work for us in a leadership role, which unfortunately they weren't able to do. And I ended up saying, okay, well, then this other person should take over because that person was her number two. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of became that balance, but it always looked to me when you have a really solid, person in place, someone who you trust, who you really believe in, empower them in whatever their career aspirational goals are. And sometimes that means right now there is no more opportunity for you to grow within our company. Mm-hmm. It's time for you to go, but leave that relationship on such a strong, solid note that when, it might be 3 years, it might be 5 years, it might be 10 years, when that person, I'm ready to make that next career move, you're still top of mind as a person they can call to say, hey, you and I worked great together in the past. Here's where I'm at right now in my career. Is there a role working for you? And then that person will actually come back, which to me, I've had that happen twice in my career.
Yeah.
And both times, it's been amazing.
We've failed a lot as leaders, I think, in the past, or maybe it was just me. But I've certainly worked with leaders who have failed at that in the past. One of my first consulting opportunities that I took on when I started my company was working with an organization that was growing really fast, but they had a high turnover. And the CEO asked me to come in and kind of, number one, see how they could hire more people because they were struggling to hire enough people. And number two, how could they keep more people? And it was a very unique organization. So I spent some time talking to leaders in the company, and I spent some time talking to the HR and recruiting team. And I was sitting in his office kind of giving him a debrief one day. And I said, really impressed with this one recruiter. I mean, she's great. She really gets it. She's doing a great job, et cetera. And he goes, well, then why is her resume on Career Builder? And I was like, what are you talking about?
That's a good question.
Well, I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, I get a weekly report from HR who of our employees have their resumes on Career Builder. And I was horrified. I'm like, okay, we've got a lot. I mean, we already had a lot to talk about. I said, first of all, in your organization, it's very bottom heavy. There were a lot of people doing the same jobs in sales roles. It was a call, sit at a desk and call. So there are hundreds of those people, 9 sales leaders and 1 VP for the sales organization. In the recruiting team, there were 38 recruiters and 1 director of recruiting. And this particular recruiter was very good. And her boss was actually younger than her. And I said, why would you ding her for wanting to grow her career when she has no path for growth in your company?
I mean, I'm looking at this from a whole other different level. There is no way that there can be one person effectively managing 9 direct reports. Like in my eyes, no more than 4. I will never have more than 4 direct reports. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work. I can't keep track of what 9 people are doing effectively and be able to give them what they need.
Yeah, but I think, again, we have to, as leaders, think sometimes we hire people in because it should be a mutual benefit. While you're here, let's benefit from your skills. Let's give you some learning opportunities. And we understand that if there's not a growth opportunity, either going up the chain or across the organization for you here, and if you do want to grow, you're going to have to go elsewhere to do that. But I think to your example, maybe that person might get a job somewhere else, continue to grow their career, and then when that director or that VP position becomes available, they want to come back. So growth often isn't within our own company. I think more today it can be because, again, we're focused more on skills and helping people to work on projects and teams rather than in functions or jobs. So that's an opportunity for them to grow more within the company. But whether you have 9 direct reports or 38 direct reports, which both, as you said, are a lot, not everyone is going to be able to grow up into the leadership position in their department. So if we're not looking at ways to help them grow their career, both within our company and other roles or opportunities, as well as other companies, where if we do the process right, they might come back to us someday if there is a good opportunity for to do that, then again, we're failing as leaders because that's the environment we work in today. I don't like to talk about generations a lot, although we've talked about a lot about generations, but the younger generations today, and I think, again, even the older generations, with the way the world of work have changed and more remote opportunities, people are very focused on career growth. Again, maybe I don't ever want to be a leader of people, but I want to have the curiosity of learning something new, the opportunity to be exposed to new things in the organization. Very few people want to do the exact same job every day for the rest of their lives. So when they come into an organization, how are you helping them to see that we have opportunities for you to grow up, out, sideways as an individual? And hopefully there will be opportunities for you to grow your career here. But if not, with that CEO that I mentioned that was getting the Career Builder resumes, one of my recommendations with him before I left was rebrand your organization as a sales training and development organization. You're hiring a lot of entry-level salespeople. 98% of them are not going to be able to grow into leaders in your company. Do a great job of identifying the high potentials, get them into a leadership training program, and then have everyone else the opportunity to develop real skills in sales that, just like back in the day, I don't know if it's still the same everywhere, but Enterprise, the car rental company, was known for having a great management training program. A lot of people wanted to hire people out of their management training program. Maybe that wasn't so great for Enterprise, but the fact that new college graduates would choose Enterprise as a place to start their careers because they were going to develop a lot of great skills and potentially be recruited by other organizations. Enterprise or any company could turn that into an opportunity to say, come work with us, start your career here, grow and develop your skills, and we will have opportunities for the high potentials to grow, because everybody wants to think, well, I'm going to be that high potential. But maybe they'll just be someone who's doing a great job and growing great skills, and they do get recruited to another organization, but they had a positive experience, and they tell other new college graduates, go start your career at Enterprise. There are ways that we can take advantage of the opportunity to have a mutual approach to growth and development that helps the company and helps the employee, and that should be our focus.
Absolutely. I think you find this a lot nowadays. It's like you have the brand, and I look at companies that have what I call the After Work Alumni Association, right? So with Google, you have your Zooglers.
Zooglers. I don't understand that name. Zooglers.
Ex-Google. XOOGL.
Okay.
Zoogle. It's ex-Google. You have the same thing with Facebook. They have alumni associations. It's almost like, a college or a fraternity or sorority or something like that, where once you've been there, you're part of this network.
Right.
And it happens also outside of high tech. I know the same thing exists for former Procter & Gamble brand managers specifically. Mm-hmm. Like there's this whole network of former P&G brand managers that have made their way around the marketing world. And they all talk to each other and they use their network, and it's amazing.
Having been an executive recruiter, I know that network well because you tap into that all the time.
Right. If you look at the number of former Procter & Gamble brand managers now in C-level positions, whether it's CMO, COO, or CEO, mm-hmm. at companies that are of similar size to Procter & Gamble,
right?
Like it's incredible. So
yeah, that's another great example. I mean, P&G's long been a place to go if you're in marketing to learn brand management. And again, as an executive recruiter, many a client would be, get me a Procter & Gamble brand manager or a former Procter & Gamble brand manager for my VP of marketing or my CMO, because I want someone who's had that classic training. So there are ways to brand your organization so people find it attractive as a growth opportunity. And again, maybe they have the opportunity to grow up or to come back, or they just grow and take their skills elsewhere.
Yeah. So how do we as leaders, how do we set very clear goals and expectations for our team and for our team members, kind of so that everything is transparent and we're not dealing with this, there's always going to be some level of murkiness, but a less murky picture of where, right? Like you said, Procter & Gamble, I'm a brand manager here. I'm going to stay here for 5 years. I know the executive recruiters are going to come calling. How do we create, let's say I'm in a smaller size company or I'm in an earlier phase company. How do I set those clear goals and expectations for the team for them to understand that this is a place you can grow. This is a place that you can start or build or continue a career at?
That's a good question. I think, some of it is your corporate brand and your culture. Is it a place that people would be proud to have on their resume? Is the place that they worked? So some of that work has to be done, overall for the company. But as the leader, anytime I think you're setting goals or creating jobs or even development paths for employees, you have to roll those down from the organizational goals. So if our, most every company is going to have a top line revenue growth, decrease costs, or what is it, cost, safety, quality, delivery are almost always in your organizational goals. So then as the leader, how can I roll that down to my people and say, well, we're in public relations might be good. We're in human resources, and our top line goal is to increase sales. How can human resources impact the goal of increasing sales? Let's drill down into that. Well, that probably means developing great training programs and opportunities for our salespeople. That probably means having a great systems for hiring and developing salespeople. So making sure that our goals, again, that gets people excited about contributing to the company every day when I feel like I'm working on something that is actually moving the company forward. One of my executive coaching clients early on, I was very pleased with his answer when I asked, why do you do what you do? And he said, I feel like the work that I and my team does every day impacts the stock price every day. We are directly connected to the success of this company. You can't have a better answer than that from your employees. And people who are, quote, buried in the organization and support functions often don't feel that connection to top line goals. And the leaders who are able to draw that connection to the work that we do and why it matters and why your work matters, and here's what you need to do to contribute to the success of the company, you're able to get better people because they feel more empowered and engaged. They feel like they're making a difference in the organization, and really meaning is what I think most people are looking for in life and in work. Does the work and the things that I do in my life when I go to bed at night, do I feel like I move the needle forward in some way? Progress and meaning. So creating, your example about Procter & Gamble, well, that's a company that's got a, well-established history of having great brands. So they want to have great people managing those brands. So over time, they've developed great systems to not only hire some of the best talent out there, but then to provide them growth and development opportunities. There's a brand manager track. You should be progressing at this rate. You should be an assistant brand manager by this time period. You should be a brand manager managing, this type of project. You should have a brand by the time, so they're giving people, when they join the company, they already see the path, right, and they know what it takes to get there. So right, that's really important. Category. What's the career path and how do I get there? And are you going to help me get there with both training opportunities and development opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, it happens to be, I love how transparent it is, because it is that, assistant brand category, right? Brand lead. And then, I'm actually quite proud of this. At Powtoon, we have, for our sales development team, there's a very clear development track. So if you're a sales development representative, you start off as an inbound sales development representative, then you go hybrid, doing both inbound and outbound sales representative, and then you have a split. You can go to the marketing team, or you can go to the sales team. And if you go to the sales team, it's inside sales rep, AE, enterprise AE. And if you're going to the marketing team, you have your choice of different teams, and you can apprentice within the marketing team throughout that time to understand. It was one of those where we actually put in that labor of love to say, how do we define, and this happened because of a returning employee, someone who left and came back to us. And one of the questions they had when they were coming back is, well, I want to know what my growth opportunities are. So we really sat down, and instead of just kind of giving him the, here's an answer, and then we're not going to do anything with it. We actually sat down, mapped out, presented to him, here is your track. I did the same with an internal employee who came to me and said, what's my career path? And I sat down with her in a documented presentation. Here is your personal career track if you decide to stay here, with milestones and timelines, so there's something tangible that she can hold me to and hold me accountable for. Well, I've hit these milestones. Right. Where's my promotion? Where's my where's this resource, that resource, this bonus, that bonus, whichever it may be that's tied to those milestones. And I love that level of accountability, because it means in order for me to have presented that, I got HR sign off. I have, further executive sign off, whatever sign offs I need to make sure this is real, actionable, and something that we can truly deliver to our employee. Because I think the worst thing we can do is give someone that picture of, look, here's this amazing career you can have.
Right.
And then 2 years in, they're like, okay, so I did all the things you want me to do. And you're like, about that.
Well, and you're not, the organizations that aren't planning for that, aren't preparing to grow the people above the person so that there are opportunities to grow. I've long advocated to leaders and executives, you need to have an executive recruiting approach to your own employees. You need to re-recruit your own employees. You should be having regular discussions, not just performance evaluation discussions, but you should be sitting down with them and saying, if you could change anything about your role or this company, what would you change if I gave you a magic wand? If you could grow into a new role in this company, where would you want to grow? And then help them develop that plan to do that, because that's what's going to happen when an executive recruiter gets their phone number or meets them at a networking event. They're going to be like, this person is perfect for the role that I'm working for. I need to understand what their career wound is so that I can help them see that I have a path for them to get what they're not getting in their current company somewhere else. So if you're not having those discussions first with your employees about what their wants, desires, needs are, setting a career path for them, helping them to stay on it, being transparent if they have to get derailed, why that is, and how we're going to get you back on, then an executive search consultant or a hiring manager or a job ad is going to convince them that that opportunity is elsewhere. And they're going to walk into your office and give their 2 weeks notice, and you're going to start crying and saying, no, why are you leaving? And they're going to be like, I didn't see the opportunity to grow my career here. And you're going to be like, but we had that. Well, you didn't communicate it. So you've got to re-recruit your own employees.
Not just that, right? If that meeting happens and you as the leader are surprised by it, there's a significantly different broken level of communication.
Sure.
Because of the people who have left my team, it happened a lot when I first joined. Obviously, with every new leader that comes in, they bring a new management style, and not everyone is always thrilled about it or even willing to give it a chance. Right? They just look, oh, leadership turnover, new guys coming in. Do I want to be here? No. When you have those people leave, it's always like, well, I knew that was happening because the guy was, I mean, I'm looking at his past timesheets or her past timesheets, and, well, they were showing up by 9:15 every day. All of a sudden, they're showing up at 10:30. Mm-hmm. Or when they're there, they're not communicating with their coworkers anymore. They're kind of just sitting at their desk with their headphones in the whole day. They're not having lunch with the team members anymore. There's always behaviors that exhibit someone is getting ready to make the transition. Mm-hmm. Which is why I find it interesting, that past CEO who has teams scouring, like, is anyone from my company, did they have their resume on Career Builder? Well, if you're waiting to the point where their resume is on Career Builder, you might be a little too late.
And you have the mindset they're going to ding them for doing that. We had a lot of things to cover in that organization. Yeah.
That's a whole separate issue. And I've actually...
Yeah, but like, you have a high turnover rate in your company. Your Glassdoor reviews are terrible, and a lot of them mention you. So we had to have some of those conversations.
Yeah, that is never a fun conversation to have with a CEO. Like, well, people are kind of saying you're the problem. Well, I'm the CEO. How could I be the problem?
Well, you are. And you hired me to tell you that.
Right. And they don't want to hear it either. So one of the things that we see, especially as people grow within their careers, is when you make the jump from individual contributor to team leader, right? We see that delegation is actually one of the hardest things for those people to adopt. These are people who are used to coming in, owning an entire process, owning it end to end. How do we kind of, get those people to, I think they all understand the benefit of delegation, but believe in their ability to delegate. And how do we as leaders ensure that they are actually delegating effectively without coming down on someone who is just promoted into a team lead position and breaking their entire confidence?
Sure. I think it's, again, multifaceted. Number one is we have to do a better job of and put more resource dollars into investing in and training our frontline managers and supervisors, or those new people coming into leadership roles. A lot of times we do just put the person who's best at the job in the next role. I hope we're getting better at not doing that. Or maybe someone who has raised their hand and said, pick me, but maybe they're not really ready, but we said, okay, we'll pick you because you're the only one that really wants it. We've got to do a better job of investing in people before they get to those opportunities, certainly giving them opportunities to grow and develop their leadership skills, assigning them to cross-functional teams, putting them in charge of a project to see how they grow and develop. I know I had a really interesting example when my son was in college. He got a gift certificate to the Apple Store for Christmas from a relative, and he went into the store here in Cincinnati and bought an iPad. And the person that sold him the iPad got into a conversation with him while they were waiting, and he found out he was a student at Ohio State University in Columbus, and said, "Hey, we're opening a new Apple store in Columbus within a couple of months. I think you'd be perfect." Now, what person wouldn't be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so perfect. The Apple Store genius said I'd be great." He said, "I think you'd be perfect. You should apply to work at the store." Well, my son wasn't looking for a job. He already had, a job, but he's like, "I'm a genius. This person thinks so I'm going to go apply." Long story short, he gets into the process, and the series of interviews, or the I wouldn't even call them interviews. They brought people in. There were hundreds of people that came to a hotel for this kind of cattle call situation for these few jobs in the Apple Store, and they sat them at tables in teams, and they gave them a problem to solve. And the people who were hiring for Apple kind of walked around and observed the teams as they worked through the problem at their table. Then there was a next round where certain people got invited back. My son got invited back. Same thing. How can you solve a problem as a team? And then he finally got interviewed, and he did get hired. And I learned something that I didn't know. The people that are greeting you when you walk in the Apple Store, they're basically triage. They're there to talk to you, to be personable, to understand what your need is. And then they are going to direct you to the Genius Bar, or they're going to show you to a specialist who can sell you a product. What they're looking for people are people with communication skills, who are personable, who can problem solve and work well with others. So their interview process worked for that. And then they bring them in and they teach them more of that. So again, to your question about developing that individual contributor, how are we helping to identify the skills that they have, maybe the development opportunities that they have, and putting them on opportunities to work on projects or cross-functional teams where we are able to see how they work with others when maybe they don't have a direct responsibility for those people. Are they able to not take on everything? If you see those behaviors like in that group project where that person's taking on everything, well, I can do that, I can do that, I can do that. Okay, we need to work on delegation. If they're delegating something, but then they're hovering over the people, there are ways to see where people have development opportunities before we put them into those roles, where we can then provide them learning, training, development opportunities. A lot of it is experience-based. Again, give them more opportunities to delegate. And when they do it well, recognize, reward that behavior. When they don't do it well, coach, advise, mentor, help them to see how it could be done better so that they're prepared when they get into those jobs and then continue that development on an ongoing basis.
So you did just talk a whole bunch about collaboration, teamwork, obviously identifying leaders as well. Let's say you're working in an organization where you have two departments who are particularly going head to head, right? All the time. It's a natural built friction in the way the departments are built. There's nothing that can really be done about it, right? But how do we as leaders encourage collaboration and teamwork amongst those team members where there is a natural friction in place? Or, my KPI leads directly to your KPI. So if you don't do your job, I can't do my job. That type of thing. How do we encourage that collaboration and teamwork there? Because the natural assumption from the latter piece of the KPI is, well, let me give you ideas on how to do your job, which then is almost always received as like, I know what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. Just go do your job, I'll do my job. And it creates more friction instead of decreasing.
Sure. I think, if the leaders aren't modeling the behavior of collaboration and working together and that we mutually support each other, then you're not going to be able to be successful. So first off, we have to have the leaders who are saying our success is mutual and it requires both of us in order to hit our goals as a team. We work together on this, and we have to reinforce that, and we have to call out behaviors where people are not, being supportive or mutually working together to do that. So it really is, I think, a function of the leader. Always, you're probably going to have individuals on the team who maybe don't play as well with others as they could. And again, we've got to call out those behaviors. We've got to correct it. We've got to provide opportunities for people to grow and develop and change that behavior. And we've got to reward and recognize when they do well. And when we achieve success as mutual teams, then we should celebrate as mutual teams. And the more you can provide opportunities, again, for people to maybe go job shadow somebody else in another department or take on a project in another department. Again, when you create that spirit of collaboration, it really is a function, I think, of the leadership and how well they set the teams up for success.
So, we've talked a lot about the people side of things. And obviously we're living in a world nowadays where it's almost like people powered by technology, mm-hmm. right? So people have It's like a carpenter. A carpenter, you throw him onto a job site with no tools, he's not going to be able to do much.
Right.
But if you give him his hammer, his nails, his saws, everything like that, he's going to be significantly better. How do we evaluate technology to ensure the technology is actually fit for purpose? Because what you see nowadays is a lot of pieces of technology are out there that kind of give a third of the answer, or 10%, 5%, and it's only once I get these 25 technologies all into place, which by the way is now costing me a small fortune. How do we evaluate technology to make sure, no, this is actually fit for purpose? It's not just a small piece within the stack, but this is a fit for purpose solution that it will actually allow me to upskill my team, manage my team, communicate with my team, give them everything they need to be successful in their role.
Sure. I think you have to do more than talk to the salespeople in the technology company, because they're wired to use words like, oh, we can integrate with that, or we can customize that, or we can make, they want to make it happen. Hopefully if it just won't happen, they're able to be honest with you and tell you that. But still, they're wired, rewarded, incentivized to sell you the product. So certainly get the specs, understand what the product will do. You need to do the work up front to see what is it that you want the product to do. What are your goals for bringing in a new technology product? How many of the boxes does this product check off without customization, without integration, without adding on platforms, etc.? And then ideally, I think you have to go out and talk to people who are actually using that product. Hopefully the vendor will give you some of their clients. Now, obviously, they're going to give you clients who are good, but you really need to have those questions about what your goals are around, does it do this for you? Did you have to customize? Did you have to buy something else in order to make it work? You have to understand how the product's in use and whether or not it's already being used to meet your goals. Otherwise, you're going to be spending a very long time implementing the new technology and then trying to customize it to meet your needs. Meanwhile, everyone's going to be doing workarounds and they're going to not be using it for what it was originally intended for if you don't do all of that hard work up front. It's a challenge because technology changes so fast and it can do a lot of things. And probably in every scenario, we end up buying something that's way more robust than what we need, and we never use all the functions and the capabilities of it. I mean, how many of us know how to use all the functions and capabilities of an Excel? An Excel spreadsheet. I can basically sum and divide.
I can average.
I can average, but if you want to talk pivot tables and all the things, you do read. I've watched some like YouTube videos on things like Notion and some of these productivity products, Evernote or whatever. All the things that people are able to do with that, and I'm like, I basically just save stuff in there. Any technology product is probably going to be able to do more than we need to do. So I think you have to also have a great relationship, not only with your sales team for that product, but the implementation team. And hopefully there's some ongoing training, learning, development opportunities where they are sharing with you how other companies are using it, or best practices, or new ways that you can do something. Because we can't just install it and then forget it. It's going to, evolve. Any technology is going to evolve. Our needs are going to evolve. And so we have to understand how we can get the best use out of it. And a lot of that's by talking to other people, I think, that are using it.
I mean, you actually just called something out, which I want to kind of bring back, right? The now first response. I need help with Excel? Like, what's the first response? I'm going to go to YouTube.
Yeah.
I'm willing to bet that if you work at an enterprise organization, there is at least one person just on your finance team who is probably an Excel wizard who can, instead of you going and watching a 7-minute, 10-minute, 14, let's be honest, hour and a half long video on YouTube.
Yeah.
Right. There's probably someone who can explain it to you, right? You reach out on Slack or, have a knowledge database where people are uploading, hey, here's how you create a pivot table and the ways you use pivot tables. It probably will take that subject matter expert, 10 minutes to put together. Mm-hmm. It'll take the person who needs that knowledge 3 minutes to ingest and then go on with their job instead of, well, I did a search in YouTube. I got 75,000 results as to how to work with a pivot table. And then you start one and you realize this isn't really what I'm looking for. And then you go to another one. It kind of gets there, but it doesn't. I need to take a course on Udemy. Now I have to go to HR, find out our corporate Udemy password, right? Whereas all it would have taken, and I think that's also something we need to instill in our team. It's okay to go outside your department or even to ask inside your department for help?
Well, it's also, I think, to your point, it's important to be communicating what you're trying to accomplish to your team. I can think of an example. I did an interim executive stint with a company a few years ago as a VP of HR. And one of their issues was it was a very distributed organization. This was before remote work was cool, and we were, the headquarters was in Denver, and then there were organizations in 23 states. And so right away, again, from talking to leaders and kind of going out and doing a listening tour, it was very clear that the people out in the field were not feeling like they were communicated well with from what the decisions were made at the corporate office. The CEO would make a decision, and then that got down to the VP, who sent it to the district director, who sent it to, and by the time the telephone game had taken place, nobody really had gotten the gist of the original message. And so I kind of said, well, I think we need to come up with a way to have one team, one message. We need some sort of intranet site. And this was a few years ago. So again, I was trying to think outside the box. I'm not necessarily a technology person, but we need some sort of intranet site where maybe we can have the CEO do a video that's a town hall for everyone, where people can comment, where they can ask questions. And I started going out and looking for technology solutions. And the CIO came to me, he was very protective, and he was like, please don't bring in any new things. You cannot bring any new things. We are very protective, it's very secure. And I was like, oh, I'm a consultant, I can do whatever I want. So I'm out trying to price all these technologies, trialing some things. And one of the people on the HR team, again, an HR person, came to me and she said, did you know that you can build an intranet with Google Sites or something like that? And I'm like, I've never heard of this. What can we do? And within like 5 minutes, she built us an intranet. Maybe not 5 minutes. Very quickly, she put together a very rudimentary intranet that we could use in the organization to begin communicating so that we could start learning what we might look for in a larger tool. But this was a person that I didn't know had that skill. I'd never heard of Google Sites, but by communicating with my team what we were trying to accomplish and saying, here's the solution that I'm looking for, someone came forward and said, I can do this. And I said, please do. And maybe we did have to assign somebody else some of her responsibilities for a while, but she was able to, become an IT software developer because she had the skill and the will and the desire to do it. And I said, please.
And you know what? And those are the people, those are the people who kind of, they're getting the big picture, right? So they're understanding it's about the solution. You don't care if the solution is an LMS or if it's an intranet or whatever. What you're really looking for is one site that carries everything that the employee needs in one centralized location so that they know where to go to look.
And you have
out
to
of
be willing
total
to
curiosity.
You have to be willing to start small. Was it perfect? Right. Was it beautiful? Did it, have great design? Not necessarily. It was functional, which allowed us to see what worked, what people started saying we'd like to see more of, and then eventually we can go out and get a technology solution or customize something to meet our needs. But start small, pilot something, try it.
So, out of total curiosity here, what was the adoption rate? Like, how often did you see people actually logging in to the intranet to pull information from there?
It actually worked out really well. We piloted it with the sales organization because that was the largest, organization, and we asked their leader to, get buy-in. We sold it to him, and he said, "I want my people using it," and they started using it and really found it helpful. And then once we could see that they were, communicating using their page on the intranet, that they were, using it to communicate top-down messaging, that they were also getting bottom-up information, that we were able to share, hey, we're doing a blood drive at the corporate headquarters on Tuesday, make sure you show up. That was something that we could see one team doing really well. And then when we rolled it out to the whole organization, we're saying, we've been doing this with the HR team and the sales team now for a couple of months. Here's how we've been using it, and here's how you could use it on your teams. So starting small, again, piloting, getting buy-in from a key stakeholder in the organization, and then rolling it out to everyone else saying, hey, we're already doing this, you should get on board.
So Jennifer, before we end, and I say, give you our thank yous, which obviously we're very grateful for your time. What if you're a business leader right now that is looking at the next 2 to 3 years of how I'm going to change and adapt my organization to be more process friendly in terms of the way information flows inside my organization, what is the biggest thing they can look out for?
I think the HR people, whatever you call them, people and culture, chief talent officer, whatever that is, they need to be in those discussions about technology and process tools that we bring into the organization. Because, and I've said this long before, the age we're in now. Maybe again, I was a little bit ahead of my time. I believe those are communication and productivity tools, and those are human issues. Too often we delegate those decisions to the IT and the tech people who are looking more at structure and requirements and system requirements, and we're not thinking about how people will use this to communicate and do their work. So I think that the people side of the business needs to sometimes lead, but definitely be heavily involved in any discussions about new technologies or processes or products that we bring in, because these are going to impact our people. We're going to need to understand what learning and development opportunities we need to create or add to help people to understand how to utilize the products better. And there are also going to be implementations that really involve a lot of heavy lifting from our people. In the end of the day, like I said, every technology product in your business is a communication tool and a productivity tool. And those are people issues. So that's my advice. Get your people, if you're the people leader in your organization, invite yourself to that table if you're not already at it. Add value, ask good questions, be business focused from a people lens, but help the people who are, maybe in charge of buying the product or the solution or implementing in the organization understand how important the people are to the success of that implementation.
I think that's 100% right. I think oftentimes we look at technology as the solution when really all it is a solution enabler that still requires human input into it. So Jennifer, first of all, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been incredible. I mean, your knowledge is just mind-blowing, and the stuff we learned today and everything we heard from you today has just been wonderful. Right? Hearing your insights and how we can build motivated, productive teams has been super helpful. I mean, personally for me, as well as for our listeners. So thank you so much for helping us understand how we can boost engagement, boost morale, boost productivity in the workplace.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed the discussion.